Um, okay, Windows. The technical support, the technical idea of why Windows is inferior, aside from my beliefs that the government's using it to get into my Windows machines, is the reason why I can't use Windows software at all. Because I lose my administrative access and then are being eavesdropped on, and I've determined it's the government because I can't imagine how the malware world is succeeding in doing this, because I would assume Microsoft would have cut off that capacity for them to break into the machines and take advantage of them, even whenever it's a fresh copy of Windows on a new computer, which is what I'm experiencing. I bought 5 Windows machines, all of them the hackers always got in. Even whenever took extra care to download the SP3, the necessary updates via Linux, and then to apply them with inside of Windows without using internet access, I still got hacked. Even whenever I installed Malwarebytes and things like just the various sorts of virus killers and malware software, it still got hacked. And that's the reason why I believe it's got to be the government that's doing this, and that it is a backdoor that is well understood, that Microsoft knows about. And probably the reason why Bill Gates is no longer in control of Microsoft is because the government have their own people in there controlling it, controlling the distribution. And he's probably getting kickbacks from the government, and that's probably where some of the stimulus is going, is into Microsoft's pocket. And then the government's probably not even taxing Microsoft. And they probably set Bill Gates up with HIV research, or inspired him, or have been put in his mind at ease or something, by realizing they're trying to build up his public self-image again, even among the nerds. Windows does its kernel, which is the base operating system of Windows, what is bootstrapped on from the BIOS. That basic kernel is not open source. That doesn't mean it's freeware. That means that anybody can look in to see how it works and determine if it's secure, then suggest changes to the source to Microsoft to help them increase the security of their operating system. They don't open source. Apple open sources their kernel. It's called Darwin. Linux open sources its kernel, which is not called anything but the Linux kernel. I'm sure FreeBSD also open source. FreeBSD being open, or freeware, I don't know if it's open source. I know the government forced them, since Berkeley is a public school, forced them to release the executables for free to the world for the 386 and 486 and following technologies up until satisfaction. Oh wow! I'm falling into incomprehensible because I'm falling asleep. Okay, so that's one. There's two. Number 3, the original versions of Windows, since the Intel chips could only sandbox a megabyte of memory, they would put the libraries called DLLs into those sandboxes so that Windows would crash. But the problem is that there is a redistributable called the Visual C++ library that is changing with every release of Windows. And they deprecate features, which is really not something you should do with a library. You should never deprecate features. You should always try to figure out how the deprecated feature is to be is to not force the entire community to refactor code, because it can happen. You don't want coders refactoring based upon deprecation, that is, the removal of features, or the reformulation of the language itself to force people to relearn the language or to learn other languages like C#. C# probably is probably valid, but since it's not an open source, will not give it validation. It's got to be an open source. It's got to be freeware before I'll give it any validity. I'm sure there is technologies that exist in commercial software development that are worthy of praise and should be used, but the thing is that because it is in commercial software, I can't trust it, because I have been burnt by commercial software. How it happened to me was with Wavefront TAV, which is an animation package, when SGI suddenly decided that they would have to put Alias, Wavefront, and TDI Explorer together, three competing companies in the 3D graphics world, to produce Maya, was the necessary step to protect SGI against Microsoft, which in '96 had entered the computer graphics market by buying up Softimage, a huge and very complex package that is well known in being able to manage large data sets. It is what Half-Life 2 was, its graphics were designed on. It's what Reboot was done with, which was a popular animation series. It's what Myst was, or Myst the Riven was designed with, which is a very large data set of pre-rendered content that had like data and things of that nature. And now I'm falling into incomprehensible again. So, okay, so number 3 was the use of the way they kept Windows from crashing, and the C++ redistributable. The problem with the C++ redistributable really is that every single application on a Windows machine is given the capacity to have its own copy of the C++ redistributable. That means that there's a concept called fragmentation. There's a significant amount of fragmentation inside of a Windows disk. It's the reason why the installs of Windows are so huge, is because of all of the redundancy in libraries, that they don't really use libraries, that they break that the programs are designed hackily. And I believe it's still the case. He might be able to find some. Yeah, okay. I think there's somebody here that's wanting me to do something. I'm going to drink a little bit more Diet Dr. Pepper because I need the caffeine. How I know that I need sleep is whenever I just start involuntarily dropping my controller. It'll be at that level in about 7 or 8 hours. So the other aspect of why Windows is inferior to Linux is that Linux was the one that brought about the concept of an app store. It's called a package manager. And the package manager maintains correctness that the distribution that is used on the package manager for any software is relevant to the person who released it, and that there is no malware in it as a result of that validation that is the correct executable or the correct software package release. So package manager before the app store that Microsoft Windows had, and freeware is all kind of the same idea as oh, and I lost my train of thought. So package manager. So number was that 4 or 5, something like that. One of the stipulations of the GPL license that it backs most freeware is that you cannot distribute any of the other releases of the GPL libraries and stuff with other libraries. You can't repackage that stuff. That the operating system is going to manage the library updates, and that is not going to go and deify. Then I dropped again. So, package manager, and you can't redistribute other people's distributables in open source. That guarantees reusability in Linux and security, because you only need to change the security holes in the libraries once. Inside of Windows, you have to have programs that will go around, find the C++, Visual C++ redistributables and other libraries that are replicated, that are fragmenting the operating system. You have to go around and verify that they're correct and that they don't have security problems. That you have to cover all the holes in the operating system that's going to permit malware to come in and take advantage of people's machines. So Linux tends to be more efficient because it reuses libraries, and that if there's any errors in libraries, it only needs to change it once. So it's not a long drawn out process to keep it correct and stable and secure from prying eyes of the government, because Linux is managed by an organization that is seeking to satisfy Windows. Yeah, commercial software, because of DRM style licensing and server licensed servers that exist on computers to keep you in check. It's unnecessary overhead. It is my belief that it doesn't add any actual value to the world, that it takes away a lot more. So I can get into it some other time. I need to make myself useful here. It is the alert. We got an hour and 15 minutes to kick ass, and we're doing it. However, it looks like a phallical symbol. We had something similar like this that was working up on the right side, and I think it was VS against NC, and TR was taking over the rest of the map. And I told VS or NC, I said, this map formation I call Alfalfa's hair. And if you didn't know what Alfalfa looked like from our game, he had one hair or sets of hairs that would stick up straight in the center of his head. And it wasn't Ed Grimley by Martin Short. It was Alfalfa from. In both cases, the characters they've got a few hairs that stick up in the middle of their head. And, shoot. So, fragmentation, package managers, reuse, security holes that Windows has prevent it from being relevant for business. People would say it's relevant for business. The reason why Microsoft is starting to move stuff into the cloud, into servers. That's the people version concept of what a server is that it is a cloud server, which is not the case. A cloud server is a copy of Linux or some Linux-like operating system called a hypervisor operating system sitting on, or a hypervisor is a part of the Intel processors and the AMD processors Notice that Intel and AMD are in a chokehold on each other. AMD licensed 64-bit processor technology to Intel before Intel had developed their own research on how to do 64-bit processors. And but Intel has a chokehold on AMD because AMD implemented the 8086 architecture, which Intel has patented. It's the reason why they are competitors eternally, is that neither Intel nor AMD is going to be able to pursue each other in court without a lot of loss of money and probably to no success. So anyhow, hypervisors is the capacity to run multiple virtual machines on an Intel processor, is offering the capacity to server farms and web server ISPs, like GoDaddy, the capacity to make money off of servers, off of Linux servers that are running Windows inside of hypervisors, inside of little sandboxes, so that people can have well-behaving Windows software with their. And I'm starting to become incomprehensible again. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to try to get so security holes, reusability, redundancy, reuse. Yeah. So let's see. Is that all? You're not given access to the source code. Therefore, if you're a coder and you have need or reason to perfect the operating system in your favor, the reality is that you cannot do it with Windows. And that it could even be that you have Windows. Yeah. So let's drop it. I'm going to go and play the game. I don't trust Windows, and I will never trust Windows ever again to any of my machines. If I can, I will try to avoid using Windows at all costs. I surely hope that Steam is capable and will do this, to allow game developers to switch to Linux without significant amount of investment. Initial investment, so they can eventually develop better skills to make games, because they're offering something called Wine. And what Wine is, and the acronym is a recursive acronym, meaning Wine is not an emulator. To let people know that it doesn't emulate Windows. What it does is it translates the calls, may even augment it with some software, but the arrays priorities. Oh, fuck, I'm losing. So, but I'll talk about it some other time. But yeah, it just sucks. And the bottom line is open source. That they haven't open sourced the kernel. That Microsoft, in order to satisfy some users' needs to run Linux, they offer Whoa, okay. Let's get into the game. How can we provide value? Look, we're working and we are losing all that land. Probably as a result of TR just being, NC becoming so, as are most kids in these games, because they use cell phones, so such a short attention span, such a focus on success, that they're willing to neglect key land near the warp gate. part of the value that I would provide if I wasn't in this character is to notify everybody in faction chat that we're getting warp gated. And the usual teenager will say to me, STFU, shut the fuck up, which I am deeply, um, uh, uh, um, offended by that phrase and even the word. Fuck is not so bad. It just is a acronym for unlawful carnal knowledge, which is to identify people who had adulterous relationships, and so and people who would adulterize people of so they're gonna cut this bit.